welcome to an analysis video of the character Patrick Jane of The Mentalist. Now, I finished The Mentalist recently enough and it's a fantastic show, and one of the reasons I enjoyed it so much is Patrick Jane. He's probably one of my favourite ever fictional characters just because anytime he's on the screen you know you will be entertained by him. So let's jump right into it. So background and origin of Jane. He's an American in the show. He's probably late 30s, early 40s. I think we see in one of the episodes his birth date is 1974, so that tracks. And he basically grew up in the circus and performing industry and was mentored by his father and presumed along with other family members. He met his wife Angela in the circuit and they left, married, and had a daughter named Charlotte. And he begins working as a psychic and kind of performer that can claim to talk with the dead and stuff like that. So he's doing this for a few years, and then approximately a few years before the show, he ends up on a talk show to discuss the serial killer known as Red John. And he kind of talks bad about Red John, saying he's a tormented little man and he's basically just calling him garbage and claiming to be able to communicate with his spirit, whatever. So he drives home and he finds Red John, the person that he was just talking about, has killed his wife and daughter, which is this kind of ground zero for this whole series, you know. So then the motivation of Jane throughout the show is that we see in the episode Red Dawn, I think is the name, where we see how he ends up in the CBI. He goes to the CBI just to badger them about the Red John case. How's the investigation? Do they have leads? Stuff like that. And then he kind of tricks an officer into punching him, so he gets to stay at the station, find out more. It comes along for a murder, and obviously, if you've seen the show, you know what Jane's like. He's an elite detective, so he solves the murder, and kind of the brass at CBI are like, okay, maybe we should give this Jane guy a job because he's pretty good. And throughout the show, while we see he's solving cases, stuff like that, his ultimate primary goal is to kill Red John throughout the series. It's mentioned a few times. And then, while appearing happy outwardly, Jane has a deep feeling of emptiness and fury that is still lingering from the death of his family. He blamed himself hugely, as he feels like he caused the death of his wife and daughter. As reference, he is an insomniac early in the show, that he's obviously, this is very distressing for him. And so, like, the way Jane dresses, he typically wears a stylish suit, shoes, nice hairstyle. I mean, he's a good looking guy. He kind of stands out. He's friendly, sociable when he first meets people. He's extremely adept socially. He knows how to play every different personality style that a human being can possibly have. The thing with Patrick Jane is, I feel like his unique relationship with every person he's met, no matter what, he treats every single person, regardless of their status, differently, just based on their personality, rather than just treating. I feel like he's a different relationship with all your Cho, Rigsby, Van Pelt, Lisbon. Even though they're all kind of doing the same thing, he has a unique relationship with them. He will go to any lengths to solve cases. He doesn't really care about the rules. He's just there to solve the cases. He really enjoys bringing killers to justice, as even though he says he wants to kill Red John, he thinks that's justified, whereas he sees the killers of the week as just scumbags, basically. So the process of Patrick Jane is, in the killers of the week, we find the body, CBI arrive. He normally kneels down, looks at the corpse, looks at every part of their body, clothes, hair, whether they've had surgery, are they fit, looks for clues about who the person was, their background, basically victimology. And then Jane and the CBI team just go around conducting interviews, and Jane, of course, would just begin to deploy his tools. He has various methods to just kind of make people uncomfortable, try and trigger stuff with them. A common one is he just goes right up and is like, you killed John Doe, didn't you? And just see how they reacts. And normally they haven't, and he's just testing them. But it can be pretty funny sometimes when there's it's kind of a mourning family, and then Patrick Jane just comes in, you killed your son. Like, it's kind of just a bit of black humor, I suppose. So often he comes up with stage situations and events and kind of employs the agents as actors, set up said scenarios to create a trap, basically, to expose the killer. Because normally, I heard on a guy called Ken Mains, his podcast, there's three main methods for murder: greed, sex, revenge. And so normally they'd set up some sort of one of those three to kind of entice the killer to go to one of those three, and like basically, and if they go, they have their killer because they did something in relation to said motivation, clearly giving us the link that they are the killer. And normally there's a confession and yada yada yada, job done. He has a pretty much perfect solve rate unless the case is related to Red John, because he kind of gets a bit flustered for obvious reasons. He's an expert in pretty much everything about human beings: body language, voice tones, hobbies, appearance, every category of characteristic that a human being can have. He probably knows about it. He can glean information from micro expressions that a person makes subconsciously. Obviously, some of the suspects aren't talking, but Jane has a method that he just kind of, he can walk around, and if he sees them kind of get a little bit uncomfortable, he's like, okay, this is where something significant is. There's also a scene at the end of the Red John plotline. There's a guy in the Blake Association, a cop, and he's obviously not saying anything. But Jane asks him yes or no questions, and the cop doesn't say anything. But Jane's able to glean yes or no, just because he is Patrick Jane, I suppose. Once you watch the show for a while, you kind of just accept this is Patrick Jane. Yeah. Often there's a scene I remember where there's a significant safe box in a bank, and he's kind of just hovering his hand around all the different safe boxes, watching suspects. He can tell when they're hiding something, and then he invariably finds the correct location. He often does with the map too. He just hovers his hand around the map, then finds the location, and invariably there's something significant at said location. In my opinion, Patrick Jane would be an excellent quiz team member, because also he has oodles of knowledge about trivia, facts about animals, languages. He's kind of like, in the UK and Ireland, we have this quiz show called The Chase, where basically you battle, members of the public battle like a quiz beast, and Jane could be a chaser because he has exceptional general knowledge and basically knowledge about everything, He's a supreme actor and often takes on roles and goes undercover to reel in suspects, which make quite funny. I remember when the Brian Moses actor is in an episode, and Jane just strolls into a bar and pretends to be from Texas just to befriend him, and it's pretty funny when he puts on accents and stuff like that. He can kind of annoy co-workers at the time, kind of like Bosco, Brett Partridge, who else now? Ray Hafner. But they respect him, I think, because of his high rate of solving murders. His efforts to solve crimes sometimes get him in perilous situations, but he's an expert at talking people out of hurting him or stalling. Just stalling because he knows a few seconds CBI are probably following him. He normally stalls them just enough and they come to save the day. And he's kind of rolling the show. There is an ensemble cast, I would say. Him and the other cops, Teresa Lisbon, Grace Van Pelt, Wayne Rigsby, and Kimball Cho are obviously huge characters, but Patrick Jane is definitely the primary protagonist of the show. He has a particularly close friendship with Teresa Lisbon, but they then kind of have a romantic relationship, then get married. And in the finale of the show, we see Lisbon's pregnant, so they're going to have a family. So yeah, I think we then see his friendships with Cho Rigsby and Van Pelt, and kind of it's nice to see the banter. And then with the FBI, when initially they want to bring him in, he becomes friendly with Abbott, Wiley, Vega, Fisher, which is nice. And up to season 6, episode 8, Red John versus CBI and Jane is the primary kind of overhanging storyline. And basically, this is the subject of the show. Jane is trying to track down Red John, and normally in mid-season or season finales, are kind of a big episode related to a Red John lead. So kind of his skills and abilities, as we went over, Jane has an encyclopedic knowledge of many, if not most, topics. And we know he's obviously intelligent, but he kind of grew up in a circus or whatever, and I don't know, did he go to high school even or university? But I think Jane is clearly very well read. He's often seen reading a book, and I think this is how he went about gathering his knowledge, is just investing a lot of time in reading and basically developing his skills as a mentalist. I think he felt that the more he knows, the more it can help in spotting clues, leads, stuff like that, and basically honing his craft. As for vulnerabilities, Jane gets extremely frustrated when it comes to kind of Red John stuff. Early on, he kind of loses his mind when Red John's involved, when he sees the red smiley face. But then he kind of gains more composure as he goes along. And then he kind of begins to treat Red John like any other case. And obviously he gets the big lead from Lorelei Martins, who tells him that he shook hands with Red John, which allows him to, obviously he remembered thousands of names, which is, it's not really surprising if you know Patrick Jane. And he kind of knows McAllister as Red John early on, I think, in season 6. But he's kind of just trying to keep to himself because he knows McAllister's probably watching him somehow. And ultimately, his ability to evolve and become less flustered with Red John allows him to secure his goal and kill Red John. So his psychological profile, it's clear early on, Jane has a huge amount of trauma from the slings. He becomes extremely uncomfortable and kind of non-talkative when Red John or his family are brought up. He has an extreme paranoia that he will get his friends or acquaintances killed in the same way his family did, and is hesitant whenever a similar scenario occurs, because he's really, in the early seasons, and to do with talk shows and stuff like that, he's hesitant because the Red John trauma is very recent. And then his morality, he's pretty immoral. He just cares about solving cases, but generally Jane doesn't really do bad things to innocent people. I think he's a good man, like deep down. He just employs any method to get killer behind bars. He doesn't really care, because he sometimes sets up false suspects. He just pulls pretty much every trick in the book. He might embarrass people, he might scare people, but he doesn't care as long as he just gets the right killer behind bars, because then he can just explain himself to them. He's not a malicious person or a bad person. He likes to stay busy and needs a job at the CBI and really gets a kick out of it. He generally enjoys taking down easy killers and helping his CBI friends, because for him it's not really work. It's quite easy because he's become so adept at reading human beings, really. And then for symbolism in teams, I think for Patrick Jane, for me, it's kind of fighting back against trauma and kind of being positive, because obviously what happened was so bad, but he still has a positive demeanor and tries to help people and solve cases and kind of maximize every day despite what happened. And he's kind of part of a popular detective archetype like Sherlock Holmes, but he's more humorous, I think. He's got lots of funny one-liners. Like, I don't think it's a bad episode of The Mentalist, really, even though there's kind of more boring ones per se. Is there a bad episode? I don't think so. I think they're all very good. So when we first see Patrick Jane, we see him solving the case. For most of the early seasons, he's kind of spending an episode a week solving a case, and then there's normally a Red John lead or related episode mid-season or end of season, and it doesn't really work out because there's also, we learn later, Red John has accomplices. He's got cronies, he's got, Blake Association, he's got lots of help, and we don't really know that. We kind of just like, how the hell is Red John getting away with it? His character development is quite linear. I think he's always kind of a freewheeling maverick who just solves cases for CBI, and he annoys other agencies at times, but they respect him because of his solve rate, and he also entertains the audience. Usually it's hard to kind of hate Patrick Jane. I just think when he's on screen, just something funny or interesting will happen, because that is also the performance of Simon Baker is just out of this world. Like not only his spoken acting, but his body language is just very, very engaging and fun. So basically, the main thing for The Mentalist is the pilot, the season 6, episode 8, Red John, is about Jane versus Red John, the overhanging story. Then after, Jane moves to kind of Latin America country and is enjoying life. But then the FBI kind of tracks him down, and basically they give him immunity in exchange for coming on board with them. Now after the Red John storyline, the episodes are solid, but like there's no overarching thing. It's just good Mentalist TV, you know what I mean? But it's not, the Red John storyline is really fantastic. So in terms of his relationships and interactions, it's clear Jane had a loving family before they were killed, which is why their loss is so heartbreaking, is that he was just very happy. In the CBI, he's a very strong friendship with all the various, his crew that we see in each episode, the ensemble cast. He kind of has an antagonistic relationship sometimes with guys like Hafner, JJ LaRoche, sometimes Gail Bertram, and then he's Brett Stiles also, the leader of the Visualized cult. They kind of, at first, Stiles is kind of suspect, but then for a murder that they first brings them to Visualize, then he's a Red John suspect, but they do kind of have a friendship. And then the FBI, he kind of becomes friendly with everyone there, as he tends to do. And he mentors the young agents Wiley and Vega, and is also friendly with Abbott and Fisher, which is pretty impressive because they were planning to bring him in for murder, and he just kind of manages to do what he does and get a nice deal working for them and gets Lisbon. His strongest relationship is with Teresa Lisbon, with whom he has a huge friendship, and then they get married, obviously. There was numerous women throughout the show that were interested in Patrick Jane. Erica Flynn is the one that jumps out to mind. She was madly in love with Patrick, and they shared a kiss once or twice, but Patrick never really considered her as a partner, because basically she's a killer and a bit of a malicious person underneath the kind of soft, pretty exterior. Patrick knows that she's just not a good person. Christina Fry was a psychic who Jane went on a date with, but then Red John got her and kind of made her into a vegetable that couldn't talk and stuff. For most of the show, Jane wears his wedding ring from the marriage to Angela, as he's still not really over that. But by the end of the show, he's with Lisbon and kind of takes off the ring and accepts that he should move on and be with Teresa Lisbon. In terms of iconic scenes and moments, I think for me, Strawberries and Cream ending where he meets Timothy Carter, and that's just crazy. This episode is just so intense and insane. And also, the Lorelai Martin storyline is pretty memorable because he's out in Las Vegas. It's an interesting bait kind of story because we know he's trying to give off the appearance he's given up, but he hasn't. He's still working for Red John. And generally, for me, I just love the scenes where Jane is just in his element, making in a group with all the suspects, making fun of people. It's funny. He finds a suspect, they run away. Cho runs after him and spears them. And I just love that kind of classic Mentalist template. And generally, it's hard not to talk about the Red John ending where he meets Thomas McAllister in the church and they have a wee dialogue. And then he ends up killing Red John, which is pretty surreal because for most of the series, it's like Red John is this big beast. How can he stop him? He kind of seems like an invincible figure, but then when Jane finally kills him, it takes a while to sink in because for 8 seasons and 7 episodes, Red John is immortal. We can't kill him. And then another iconic scene for me is probably let me think now. the scene where he is getting captured by the imposters, then Red John comes and saves him and sings the poem Tiger Tiger, and that's weird or whatever. And another key scene for me is when Todd Johnson says Tiger Tiger. That's the first time we kind of realize that someone outside of Red John, like this poem is obviously linked to Red John, and when he says Tiger Tiger, we're kind of like, there's a kind of network with Red John here. This is pretty insane. And then a lot of episodes, it kind of has a antagonistic relationship with a random suspect, which is kind of funny. There's a guy Harkin, a redheaded guy in some science lab. That's pretty funny. And then his defining characteristics at any time is determination, bravery, what he feels to do the right at any time. And in terms of an overview, I think Patrick Jane is one of the best characters in history of fiction, because he's got everything you want to entertain you. In terms of writing and stuff, it's excellent. But also in terms of, for me, from watching a TV show, you can kind of delve into the writing and stuff like that, which I do respect, but also just the pure sitting down to enjoy something and kind of go into a nice fictional fantasy world, bit of escapism. I think Patrick Jane really is good for that, because he's just, everything about him is just, his background is extremely interesting. The storyline that's going on in the show is extremely interesting, and also just his characteristics, his dialogue, the way he's written, the acting is just fantastic. So yeah, really love Patrick Jane, great character. And The Mentalist, it's a fantastic show. You need to watch. In terms of The Mentalist, I feel like I like shows like, recently in the last few years, I watched Dexter, Hannibal, shows like that. If you like them, you like The Mentalist, and vice versa. So yeah, fantastic show. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.